Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boom and Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today we are 2/3 through the season, and so we're doing our NFL check-in. So we checked in after 6 games, and I kind of have my thoughts. You could go check that out, but it's pretty much been for the most part what I thought. When I talked about who I felt were competitors and all that. And honestly, it was still early in the season, but that was just my thoughts on projecting. And now 6 weeks later, I feel even more comfortable than with what I said. And so I think the main conversation at the time was the discussion about the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, and the Bucks, Tom Brady. And what I said is that I do feel like they were done because it wasn't necessarily the quarterbacks or the Packers receivers. It was more so the defense. And so you look at the numbers in total and people will still say the Bucks this, Bucks that. But yet recently, week after week, you have seen that those numbers don't really translate on the field. So the Bucks can come in ranked whatever they were ranked this week, but you saw how it played out. And I know back at that time, they were still waiting on some people to come back from injury and whatnot. And I think that was before Shaquille Barrett got hurt. Maybe it was after, or maybe it was right that week. But either way, I said when they were healthy, there was still something off about them. And I was telling my friend, I was like, I just think they're broken and I don't know that they can be fixed. And so you look at some teams, and I hate to do this, but we'll pick on the Texans. Some teams just don't have talent on the roster. And so they need more talent, outside of the culture and all that and the coaching. They just simply need more talent. And then there's teams that have a talented roster but are not producing. And so that to me is a lot more concerning, especially when you take a closer look at some of the things that they're doing, whether it be time of possession, whether it be first downs, whether it be red zone, whatever. And so the Bucks, obviously, like I said, rank high in certain things, but over the stretch of the losing, you really have seen with players together, with, some people being hurt, kind of having that same production. And so that kind of worried me at the first third of the season. And the same goes for the Packers, and probably even more. I mean, the Packers, I don't really know what it is. And so people really keep bringing up this idea they need to draft, they need to do all this. And it's just like, how much more can you do? And unless people want to say, well, those players just completely fell off, then okay, I guess, but I don't really assume that happened. So you're talking about one of the top interior defensive linemen. You're talking about a ascending edge rusher who was really pacing the league, and Gary before he got hurt. You're talking about Preston Smith, another solid edge person. You're talking about Alexander, one of the top corners in the league, back healthy. Amos at the safety. I mean, and then you had Devondre Campbell was the first team All-Pro linebacker last year, inside linebacker. That means out of everybody. And then you add Quay Walker, a top prospect. And so you just look at this and it doesn't make sense. Now, they've had injuries between these last 6 weeks. But again, I brought this up before because they were healthy. They were all together and they still were playing poor. Not just can't stop the run or can't stop the pass, but really not great at either one. And it really didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so when you have issues like that, it goes deeper than rap. It's deeper than just, oh, we don't have talent. There's something, and I use the word broken, but that might be harsh. But I would say there's something fundamentally wrong with whatever's happening, whether it's the DC and the way they're practicing or putting a game plan together, or something is off. And that's why I said those two teams would be done. And the Packers, for the most part, yeah, they probably, they won't be able to win the division, but they probably, I wouldn't say probably, there's a chance they could get the last spot, but I don't see them getting it over Seattle. And so they're pretty much done, especially with Aaron being hurt. The Bucks, I think they're kind of done, but because of the division, they're going to have a chance. And if you look at the schedules going forward, it looks like there's going to be a clash between the Bucks and the Falcons. And nobody would even consider the Falcons a great team, but it's just that's the way the playoffs are set up. And then you got the Saints, who I do think have the ability to put together some wins. But I don't see two of the teams from NFC South coming in. So it's very possible the Bucks either don't make the playoffs or get a home game. So in that case, and once we get to the playoffs, we could, have that discussion. But as of now, even if they get in, it's just they have not at all been the team that people expected this year. And that's not a team, 6 weeks through, that I thought would be a competitor, and it still has looked that way. So those were the two main teams, and then a lot of the other teams in the league, we know where they are. There's not a whole lot of consideration. And in terms of the playoff race, and I said this before, really in terms of the Super Bowl, there's only a handful of teams I saw as competitors, and like I said, over the last 6 weeks, I feel that even more strongly. And so you look at the playoffs race, there's going to be some push for the last few spots, and some things might change. But overall, I don't think this is a year, and again, I'm repeating myself, but I don't think this is a year where, oh man, all these teams are so good, that's why it's parity. No, I think it's parity because a lot of these teams are bad. And so I do think fully strongly I can say that the Super Bowl is going to come down to 5 or 6 teams. And I haven't really changed my mind a lot on that. Now, the interesting thing is going to be the Bengals, because the Bengals are one of those teams that I put in the contender race as far as can go the distance. Now, we have to see if they'll get healthy, but on top of that, their schedule for the rest of the year is no joke. And so it is very possible, because you have the Ravens, who more than likely should win the division. But then you got the Browns, who we really don't know. We have no clue what that's going to be like at this point. Now, after this week, people might say they have a good idea, but as of right now, we have no clue of what they can do, especially the fact they just beat the Bucks. And so with Deshaun Watson coming back, that makes them a wild card. But even outside of the division, like I said, the rest of their schedule is no joke. So the Bengals could very well get pushed out of their spot. And I said early on that the Bengals would be in a pretty good position, because a lot of those early losses, if they were able to stay healthy and get it together and get in the playoffs at the 6th seed, then they would somebody would end up playing a Bengals team that you really wouldn't want to see in the playoffs. And so I still feel the same way, but it's just going to come down to that schedule. And if they get healthy, of course, Chase and Mixon matter a whole lot. But that's one of those teams that you have a defense that is fundamentally sound enough to do what it has to do. And then obviously healthy, you have an offense that is really hard to, contain. And so that is going to kind of be the story of the Bengals, but they very possibly could be put out in favor for the Patriots, which is a team that I would not call a competitor. So, I do think the Chargers are going to get in, because I think their schedule is a lot more forgiving, because you're basically looking at the Jets, the Bengals, the Chargers, the Patriots. And I think the Chargers have one of the more forgiving schedules. And so I think they will get in. It'll just matter which seed they'll be at. And so it's possible that you have, it'd be 3 AFC East teams either way. You could have Jets, Dolphins, Bills. You could have Patriots, Dolphins, Bills, and then the Chargers. And so if the Bengals get bumped out, it just kind of comes down to schedule. But on the NFC side, I think it's pretty locked in for the most part. The only thing that'll really be different, like I said, is the NFC South and figuring out who that's going to be. And then the NFC East, the Commanders and Giants could possibly get in together, but I think one of them is going to get bumped. More than likely for Seattle, which is really the only other team that I think probably deserves to be in the playoffs in that spot. And so, like I said, the Falcons are going to, and the Saints are pretty much going to go down to the wire with the Bucks, and then we'll see how that goes. But, none of those teams, like I said, to me are really competitors. So when we're talking about competitors, it comes down to three, I believe it's three things. But A, you got the talent on the roster. B, you have the experience on the roster or the coaching staff somewhere. And then C, you got to have the coaching. And so for me, I think you have the Eagles, who their defense is actually pretty similar to Dallas. And I said before I didn't believe Dallas was elite. I had to see that. And I still don't. I honestly don't think any of these defenses are elite, to be quite honest with you. But I don't think they're elite, but obviously they are good enough at what they do to affect the game. And that's the same thing with the Eagles. So the Eagles, even though they just had a real big injury to CJ, and so we have to see if he's back, because that will change a lot. But overall, their secondary has played so well that they're able to keep their offense in good positions, even though the defense was showing at times. If you look statistically, I was telling my friend every week when I update the stats that I track, statistically, first down run conversion, or basically first down conversion by run, the Eagles were one of the worst throughout the first third of the season. And obviously their total numbers weren't like that, so people didn't really care. But then it started to show up more and more. And this was even when they had Jordan Davis. This started to show up more and more as kind of a bit of a heel in terms of them stopping the run. Not to say they're bad, but they were not as good as people thought. And the same thing with Dallas as well. And so I don't think the Eagles particularly have a crazy pass rush where you can point to Parsons and Lawrence and Armstrong for the Cowboys. But I do think that the pass defense is enough that if you get into a passing down, that the Eagles defense becomes an issue, and same for Dallas. And so while they might have, a hole, they aren't, or while they might have a hole, they aren't bad defenses. They still are really good and disciplined enough to do what they have to do. And so the Eagles have that, and then the offense is just really efficient through the run game, but also enough through the passing game to do what they have to do. And so they're one of the contenders. Dallas is one of the contenders for the same reason. And that's really it. Well, and then the 49ers. And then the 49ers, their question is the health as well, because you got Elijah Mitchell on IR now. And despite how good Christian McCaffrey has been, they've really leaned on Elijah Mitchell as well in that run game. So he's out. And Christian's hurt, or we don't know to the extent, but he's had a little bit of damage too. So we'll have to see how he comes back. And then Eric Armstead's been out for a long time. And so we got to see if they can be healthy by the time the playoffs start. But even if they do, we know that they have the template to win games and get to the Super Bowl. And so you got to trust in that. But I would say if you look at it overall, the 49ers haven't been, I mean, not that they bad, but they haven't been dominating games like some people might think or kind of talk like they are. And so, I say they have the coaching, they have enough veteran players, and they have more than enough talent to be competitors. So I still put them up there, but just like the Eagles, they have some recent injuries that you really got to keep your eye on. So, but for me, that's it in the NFC. As I said before, when the Vikings were riding high, I don't trust their defense enough. And their pass defense, their defense wasn't great. And then, since week 6, their pass defense has become one of the worst in the league. So and a lot of people will point out Kirk Cousins and say, you know, that's one of the reasons that they wouldn't trust them. And it's not necessarily that for me, to be honest with you. And I always say it's funny how people go crazy about Justin Jefferson and at the same time say Kirk Cousins sucks. Like, I don't really understand how you can watch Justin Jefferson do what he does as far as putting up numbers and completely give no credit to Kirk Cousins. So I don't have that big of an issue with Kirk Cousins. I mean, he's not a high tier quarterback, but he's definitely more than good enough and capable enough to get you what you need. It's just that defense that they have. I don't see anybody going far with a defense like that. So that's kind of how I felt over there. Now in the AFC, it's a bit of a different conversation, but I got the Chiefs, Dolphins, Bills, and Bengals. And the Bills are kind of in that same boat like a lot of these teams. The injuries are piling up. I mean, you're not getting Hyde back. Poyer's been in and out. Tre'Davious White hasn't been back for a long time. We don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back. Now Von Miller's hurt. And then again, when they were together outside of Hyde and Tre'Davious White, but when the starters were there for the most part, they have not been one of the top defenses. Like, yes, they were top last year and they came in with all that, you know, fanfare, but they have not been one of the top defenses, and more recently have fell to more of a middle of the road defense. And so that's something to keep your eye on, because yes, I think naturally you'll look at the Bills, not just because they're favorited, but because of what the offense could do and Josh Allen can do. And then having a number one defense is like a no-brainer. But now that the defense isn't necessarily a number one defense, and they've started to run the ball a little better with Singletary and everything, but what does that team look like in the playoffs if they can't get healthy on defense? And that'll be one of the big questions. But overall, I just think, you know, with Josh Allen, number one, but with the coaching and the veterans on the team, I do think there's still a team that has what it takes to compete. The Chiefs, it ain't much I gotta say about them. The Chiefs can do it. The Dolphins, I think that's the case of a so-so defense, but undeniable offense. And then on top of that, you get Mostert this year, and then they just got Jeff Wilson. And so you hook them up with that coach who was previously with 49ers and what he can do and what he knows about the run game. Add that to the most explosive pass game. And I just think, especially if you in Miami, it's just going to be really hard to deny that team. Much like the Chiefs were for a minute, where you could get their defense in many different ways, but it's going to be hard to have a shootout with that offense. And so I do think they have enough, because it's not, you know, it's not Buffalo. It's not one dimensional. They can come downhill too with the run game and control the clock. So I do think that makes them a contender. And then the Bengals I talked about earlier. So those are some of the teams, that I talked about prior, and I still feel the same way. I mean, you look at the other teams, you're talking about the Titans. We know how one-dimensional that offense can get, especially when they're behind. Well, not behind, but when they do get behind in the score, you're asking a lot for them to have to try to climb back. The Ravens, that defense, much like Buffalo, isn't what it used to be. And not necessarily due to injuries across the board, but they, like last year, they're so banged up. And this year, I wouldn't say they're like super banged up, but still, they're just not producing. Not like they used to. And I don't see them doing that in the playoffs. And then the offense has always been, a run first, play with the lead type of team. And we've seen that has not helped them this year, especially when the defense can't keep you in the front seat the whole game. And obviously when you go to the playoffs, you're going to be playing some offenses that are not going to be shut down too easily. And then the Jets, I mean, come on. The best chance, I think, is the Chargers. Like, the Jets, Mike White, Zach Wills, whoever it is, even with that defense, I don't see that happening. And then the Patriots the same way. So I think the Chargers, if they get in, they got probably one of the best shots. But even with them, defense can't be trusted. They're not getting J.C. Jackson back, and even when he was there, he got benched. So, the Chargers, I would think, have a better chance than the Jets or the Patriots, but at the same time, not a team I would call a contender. And then the NFC, I don't really got to get into that. So, yeah, I mean, again, we're 2/3 of the way through the season, and I really think this year is very clear-cut who the competitors are. So, anyway, that's it for me. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.